The restaurant was the definition of luxury: crystal chandeliers, velvet-lined seats, and a quiet murmur of wealthy guests enjoying their meals. A billionaire, accustomed to such grandeur, sat at his reserved table, a glass of the finest wine in hand, waiting for his meal. The waiter arrived, placing an exquisite dish before him, a delicacy only the richest could afford. The billionaire lifted his fork, savoring the scent before taking his first bite. Then it happened. A loud crash near the entrance. Gasps echoed through the restaurant as heads turned. A filthy, barefoot boy stood in the doorway, panting, his clothes tattered, his face streaked with dirt. He looked frantic, his small chest rising and falling with every desperate breath. He locked eyes with the billionaire and then, with the urgency of someone who had just seen death itself, he screamed. "Don't eat that." Silence. The billionaire's hand froze mid-air, the fork just inches from his lips. A wave of confusion and annoyance washed over him. What kind of nonsense was this? The waiters and security rushed toward the boy, their hands outstretched to grab him, their voices stern. "You can't be in here," one of them barked. "Get out." But the boy stood his ground. "Please," he begged, his voice trembling, his eyes wild. "You can't eat that." The billionaire narrowed his eyes. This had to be some scam. Some street kid, trying to cause a scene, hoping for money. Pathetic. The other diners whispered amongst themselves, some pulling out their phones to record. "Who let that kid in?" someone murmured. "This is ridiculous," another scoffed. But there was something about the boy's expression that made the billionaire hesitate. It wasn't the desperate plea of a beggar asking for a meal. It was fear, genuine, raw fear. Security grabbed the boy by the arm, ready to drag him out. "Wait." The billionaire's voice was sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. The security froze, awaiting further orders. The billionaire turned to the boy, his expression unreadable. "Why?" he asked, his tone cold and clipped. "Why shouldn't I eat it?" The boy swallowed hard. He looked terrified, but he wouldn't back down. You just can't," he insisted, glancing at the plate as if it contained poison. "Something's wrong with it." The billionaire laughed dryly. "And you know this how? You're what, some food expert now?" His voice was laced with mockery, but deep inside, a small part of him was curious. The boy's lips quivered. His eyes darted to the kitchen, then back to the billionaire. "I just know," he whispered. "Please. Just don't." The hairs on the billionaire's arms stood up. Something about the way the boy spoke, the way his voice shook, made him uneasy. Was this a coincidence? A joke? Or was there something more? The restaurant manager stepped forward, trying to smooth over the situation. "Sir, don't listen to this nonsense," he said, forcing a nervous chuckle. "I assure you, our food is perfectly safe." The billionaire's eyes flickered between the boy and the manager. One looked desperate. The other looked tense. The air in the room shifted. The billionaire lowered his fork. Then, in a tone that sent chills through the staff, he ordered, "Someone, test the food." The manager's face paled. The boy exhaled shakily, relief flashing across his face. But the billionaire saw it now, the flicker of panic in the staff's expressions, the slight shift in their movements. Something wasn't right. And he was about to find out why. The restaurant fell into a tense silence. The billionaire sat still, his mind racing, his fork still hovering above his plate. The homeless boy stood a few feet away, his hands balled into fists, his entire body trembling as he watched the billionaire with wide, expectant eyes. The staff was nervous. The manager, trying to remain composed, forced a smile and stepped closer. "Sir, I assure you, there is no need to test the food," he said lightly, though his voice held an unmistakable strain. "This is one of our finest dishes, our chef personally prepared it. There's no cause for concern." But the billionaire wasn't stupid. If there was nothing to hide, why did the manager look like he had just swallowed a knife? The billionaire set his fork down. I said, test it. A sharp edge in his voice made the waiter standing by his table flinch. The entire restaurant had stopped eating, now watching in eerie silence. The manager's jaw clenched. His fingers twitched. Of course, sir, he finally said, his voice suddenly stiff. He turned to the chef behind the counter, giving him a look, one the billionaire didn't miss. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, watching. This was going to be interesting. A waiter hesitated before stepping forward, reaching for the plate. He swallowed hard. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. That reaction was enough to confirm his suspicions. He smirked. No, he said, raising a hand. Not him. The manager froze. The billionaire tilted his head, his sharp gaze locking onto the chef standing behind the counter. You, he said coolly. You take the first bite. A single heartbeat of silence. Then, panic. The chef stiffened as though someone had poured ice water down his back. A beat passed. Then another. The billionaire waited, his smirk widening. Something wrong? He asked mockingly. The manager's face turned an ugly shade of red. Sir, this is ridiculous. It's a simple request, the billionaire cut him off. His voice was calm, but there was a deadly finality to it. If there's nothing wrong, take a bite. The chef's hands trembled. His forehead glistened with sweat. I just ate, the chef stammered. I'm not hungry. Liar. The billionaire's voice was like steel. His patience had run out. With slow, deliberate movements, he pushed the plate forward. The silver fork clinked against the porcelain, the sound slicing through the tense air. Eat it, he ordered. Everyone was watching now. The chef's breathing turned shallow. His eyes darted to the manager, silently begging for help. The billionaire leaned in slightly, voice dropping to a near whisper. What happens if you eat it? He murmured. Are you afraid you'll drop dead? The chef visibly flinched. That was all the confirmation the billionaire needed. A slow, eerie grin spread across his face. There it was. The truth. Something was wrong with the food. And the boy had known. The billionaire turned back to him, curiosity flickering in his sharp gaze. How did you know? He asked, his voice quieter now. The boy hesitated, glancing at the still untouched plate, his lips pressing into a tight line. But before he could speak, the chef bolted. Without warning, he spun on his heel and made a break for the back exit. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Guests gasped. Staff scrambled. The billionaire's security leaped into action. Catch him, the billionaire barked, his voice thundering across the room. 2 guards lunged after the chef, their heavy boots pounding against the marble floors. The manager, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, turned pale. Sir, I can explain. Save it, the billionaire snapped. His eyes blazed as he stood from his seat, towering over the trembling man. He turned back to the homeless boy, his expression unreadable. You saved my life, he said, more to himself than anyone else. The boy stayed silent, his small shoulders tense. But why? Why would a homeless child, someone who had nothing, someone society ignored, go out of his way to save a billionaire's life? What did he know? And perhaps more importantly, what had just almost happened to him? The billionaire's gut twisted. He suddenly realized. This wasn't just about food. Something bigger was going on. And he was about to find out exactly what. The restaurant erupted into chaos as security guards chased the chef, their heavy footsteps pounding against the sleek marble floor. The billionaire didn't move, his sharp gaze locked onto the homeless boy who had just saved his life. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly, his small frame tense as if he was waiting for something worse to happen. His wide eyes darted between the billionaire and the plate of untouched food, as though even looking at it made him sick. The billionaire leaned in, voice low, measured. Tell me. Now. The boy hesitated. You don't want to know, he muttered. The billionaire's jaw tightened. Boy, I own half the buildings in this city. I have more power than you can imagine, he said, his voice filled with an icy certainty. If someone just tried to kill me, I need to know why. The boy looked up, studying the billionaire's face for a moment. Then, in a near whisper, he said, It's not just you. A chill slithered down the billionaire's spine. Not just him? Before he could press further, a loud grunt echoed through the restaurant. The security guards had caught the chef, slamming him against the wall near the kitchen doors. He struggled against them, but their grip was like iron. The billionaire turned, his lips curling into a smirk. Well, he drawled, approaching slowly, seems like you lost your appetite. The chef's face was pale, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. He refused to meet the billionaire's eyes. The billionaire took his time, adjusting his suit cuffs, before folding his arms. Talk. Silence. The billionaire sighed. Do I really need to explain what happens next? The chef flinched, but said nothing. The billionaire glanced at his head of security. Take him to the back room, he ordered. He has a few things to explain. The chef's eyes widened in panic. Wait. No, The guards dragged him away, disappearing through the side door. The billionaire turned back to the restaurant manager, who stood frozen, his face ashen. You, the billionaire said. His voice was calm, too calm. Did you know? The manager's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. I didn't. Liar. The single word slammed into the manager like a bullet. The billionaire tilted his head slightly, eyes sharp as a blade. I don't like liars, he said, his tone soft but deadly. The manager broke. His legs shook as he collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. I didn't know it was going to happen like this, he whispered. I swear. The billionaire narrowed his eyes. So you did know something. The manager sucked in a shaky breath, avoiding his gaze. The billionaire let the silence stretch, pressing down on him like a weight. Then, finally. I was told to keep quiet, the manager admitted, his voice barely audible. They pay me to look the other way. I don't ask questions. The billionaire's stomach turned. How deep did this go? And more importantly, who was they? His mind raced. He had enemies, of course. Many. But none bold enough to poison him in a public restaurant. That took power. Planning. Precision. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was something else. The billionaire clenched his jaw, turning back to the boy. You knew before anyone else, he said, eyes boring into him. How? The boy shifted uncomfortably, his fingers clenching into his ragged shirt. He looked around nervously, then leaned in, lowering his voice. Because I've seen it happen before. A sharp, cold chill sliced through the billionaire's chest. Before? The boy's expression darkened. People get sick after eating here. Some don't make it. The billionaire felt a rare flicker of unease. His entire life, he had been surrounded by deception, greed, and power struggles. He had learned to spot a lie instantly. This boy? He wasn't lying. And that was terrifying. The billionaire studied him, his mind racing. Why haven't you told anyone? The boy scoffed bitterly. And who would believe a homeless kid? He wasn't wrong. But now, the billionaire did believe him. And he was going to find out exactly who was behind this. He straightened, pulling out his wallet, about to offer the boy money, when the boy suddenly tensed, eyes darting toward the front door. The billionaire followed his gaze. A black SUV had just pulled up outside the restaurant. The boy's face went white. No, he breathed. He took a step back, panic flashing in his eyes. The billionaire frowned. What is it? The boy shook his head quickly. I have to go. Then, he ran. The billionaire reacted instantly. "Get him," he barked at his guards. But the boy was fast, weaving between tables, slipping through the back exit before anyone could reach him. The billionaire swore under his breath, his chest tightening with something strange. Why was the boy running? And more importantly, who had just arrived? The billionaire turned back to the SUV outside, his instincts screaming. Something was coming. Something big. And he was right in the middle of it. The billionaire's eyes locked onto the black SUV parked outside the restaurant. It sat there, unmoving, the dark windows revealing nothing. His instincts screamed at him, this wasn't a coincidence. The homeless boy had recognized that car. That was why he ran. And now, the billionaire had a decision to make. He turned to his security team, his voice cold and sharp. "Follow that boy. Find out where he's going. I want answers." The guards nodded and immediately took off after the kid. The billionaire exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders back as he turned his attention to the SUV. A few seconds passed. Then, the car door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in an expensive black suit, his build solid, his movements calculated. Not an average businessman. No, this was someone used to power, someone who was either dangerous or worked for someone who was. The billionaire narrowed his eyes as the man approached the restaurant doors, stepping inside like he owned the place. The entire restaurant fell silent. The tension thickened. The man scanned the room once, then walked straight toward the billionaire's table. The billionaire remained seated, his body relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. The man stopped in front of him, offering a thin smile. "Quite the commotion," he said smoothly. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something else. The billionaire studied him. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the untouched plate of food, his smile barely faltering. "I hear you had a little interference with your meal," he said, voice light. The billionaire tensed. "He knows." The man slowly lifted his gaze, eyes locking onto the billionaire's with unsettling precision. "You really shouldn't listen to everything a street rat tells you," he murmured. Threat. The billionaire's grip on the table tightened slightly. "So you know something," he said, keeping his tone neutral. The man tilted his head. "I know that sometimes, things happen. People overstep. Get in the way of business." He smiled again, but this time, the billionaire saw what was behind it. A warning. A silent message, "Drop this. Let it go." The billionaire smirked, leaning back in his chair. "That's interesting," he said lazily. "Because I was just about to start asking questions." The man's smile vanished. A few seconds of silence passed between them, a silent war of dominance. Then, the man exhaled, shaking his head as if disappointed. "Mr. _____________, let me give you some advice," he said, his voice still smooth, but laced with steel. "You have everything a man could want: money, power, influence." He leaned down slightly. "Don't throw it away for a nobody." The billionaire's expression didn't change, but something in his chest tightened. They were talking about the boy. That meant they were watching. They knew. And that meant, the boy was in danger. The billionaire's smirk returned. "You seem very invested in this for someone who thinks it's nothing." The man's jaw clenched ever so slightly. "You should leave it alone," he said one last time, voice lower now. The billionaire leaned forward, his eyes cold, unshaken. "Or what?" The man didn't blink. "Or you'll regret it." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing out of the restaurant as smoothly as he had arrived. The SUV's engine rumbled. Then, it pulled off into the night. The billionaire sat there for a long moment, his mind working fast. This was bigger than he thought. This wasn't about a bad meal, this was about power, control, and secrets. And that boy? That boy knew something important. Something people were willing to kill for. His phone buzzed. A text from his security team. Lost him. The kid vanished. We're searching. The billionaire's hands curled into fists. He didn't know why yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He needed to find that boy. Before they did, the billionaire sat in the back of his car, staring out the window as the city lights flickered past. His mind was racing. The message had been clear, leave it alone. But he had never been the kind of man to walk away from something just because someone told him to. If anything, their threats only made him more determined. His phone buzzed again. Another text from his head of security. No sign of the boy. He knows how to disappear. The billionaire clenched his jaw. He needed to find him. Who was this kid? How had he known the food was dangerous? And why had he reacted like that when the black SUV showed up? Too many questions. Not enough answers. He tapped his fingers against the leather seat, deep in thought. Then, an idea hit him. Driver, he said suddenly, change course. Where to, sir? The billionaire's lips curled into a dangerous smirk. The streets. If the boy lived in the shadows, then that's where he'd start looking. The search begins. The billionaire had never set foot in places like this. The streets were dark, unforgiving, nothing like the glass towers he owned. But he was determined. With his security team close behind, he moved through alleys, abandoned lots, places the wealthy never dared to go. He showed photographs of the boy, a still image pulled from the restaurant's security footage. Most people ignored him. Some scoffed, muttering under their breath about how rich folk never cared unless it benefited them. But then, a breakthrough. A woman sitting outside a convenience store squinted at the photo, then nodded. Yeah, I seen him, she muttered. Couple blocks over. He don't stay in one place too long, though. Where exactly? The billionaire pressed. She gestured down the street. Behind that old warehouse. The billionaire didn't wait. He tossed a wad of cash onto the counter and took off. The encounter. The warehouse was half collapsed, its walls lined with graffiti. The air smelled of oil and damp cement. The billionaire's security team spread out, scanning the area. Then, movement. A small figure darted between two dumpsters. The boy. Wait, the billionaire called, stepping forward. I just want to talk. The boy froze. Then, like an animal caught in a trap, he spun around, his fists clenched, his entire body coiled with fear. Go away, the boy snapped. The billionaire held up his hands. I'm not here to hurt you. The boy's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. They're looking for me, he whispered, his voice raw. I shouldn't have helped you. The billionaire's chest tightened. Who are they? He asked. The boy hesitated, then whispered something that sent chills down his spine. They own everything. The billionaire's stomach dropped. He took a slow step forward. Then that means they own me too. The boy shook his head. No. You're different. You don't know it yet, but they're afraid of you. The billionaire's blood ran cold. Why? The boy bit his lip, as if debating whether to say more. Then, in a near whisper. Because you're not like them. For the first time in his life, the billionaire felt truly lost. There was something bigger at play, something dangerous. And this boy? This nobody, this homeless kid. He was the key to all of it. The billionaire stood motionless, his eyes locked onto the boy's. Because you're not like them. The words echoed in his mind, chilling him in a way no business deal, no corporate betrayal ever had. He had spent his entire life at the top, untouchable, feared, respected. But now, for the first time, he felt like a pawn in someone else's game. The boy was breathing fast. His small chest rising and falling as he kept glancing around, as if expecting someone to step out of the shadows and take him. Who are they? The billionaire asked, his voice low, controlled. The boy licked his dry lips, his fingers curling into his tattered sleeves. You don't want to know. I think I do, the billionaire shot back. The boy hesitated. Then, in a near whisper, he muttered. The people who decide who lives and who doesn't. A cold wave rolled through the billionaire's body. You mean politicians? He asked, trying to make sense of it. The boy shook his head. Worse. The billionaire's patience was wearing thin. Then explain it to me. The boy exhaled sharply, looking him over before finally speaking. This city, the world, it's not what you think, the boy muttered. You think money makes you powerful? You think because you own things, you have control? The billionaire didn't like the way that sounded. The boy continued. The real power is with them, the ones in the dark. They don't show up in news articles, they don't have their names on buildings, but they own everything. He took a slow step forward, his eyes dark and full of something the billionaire didn't understand yet. You just became a problem, the boy whispered. They were supposed to control you, but you're not following the rules. The billionaire's breath hitched. His mind flashed back, the failed poison attempt, the black SUV, the suited man's warning. Was this all a test? A setup? Had he been marked? He clenched his fists. Why do they care about me? The boy gave him a look. Because you have something they can't buy. The billionaire frowned. And what's that? The boy's answer came instantly. A choice. Silence. A deep, suffocating silence that made the billionaire's heart pound. The boy turned away, preparing to run again. But the billionaire acted fast. You don't have to keep running, he said, stepping forward. You saved my life. Let me protect yours. The boy froze. You can't, he muttered. No one can. I can, the billionaire insisted. I have resources. Money. Power. The boy let out a humorless laugh. Money won't save you from what's coming. The billionaire stiffened. And what exactly is coming? The boy's lips pressed into a thin line. War, he whispered. The billionaire's pulse spiked. War. The boy nodded. Not the kind you see on the news. Not the kind fought with weapons. This is bigger. The billionaire's body tightened. If that was true, then he had two options. Walk away. Pretend none of this happened. Go back to his life of luxury and ignore the boy's warnings. Step into the unknown. Dig deeper. Find out who these people were and why they had tried to silence him. He took a deep breath, staring at the boy's tired, haunted eyes. He had already made his choice. Come with me, he said. The boy hesitated. I shouldn't. Then don't, the billionaire said, his voice calm. But I'm not leaving without answers. The boy studied him, his jaw tight. Then, finally, he nodded. But before either of them could move, tires screeched in the distance. The billionaire's stomach dropped. The boy turned pale. They found us, he whispered. The billionaire whipped around just in time to see another black SUV barreling toward them. No time to think. No time to react. Just time to run. The billionaire's heart pounded as the black SUV tore through the street, its headlights slicing through the darkness like predatory eyes. The boy grabbed his wrist. We have to go, now. No argument. No hesitation. They ran. The billionaire's expensive shoes pounded against the pavement as they ducked into a dark alley, the boy leading the way like he had done this 100 times before. Behind them, the SUV skidded to a stop, and doors slammed open. Men in suits. No uniforms. No badges. But their intentions were clear. They weren't here to talk. The billionaire could hear their footsteps, their sharp, calculated movements as they spread out, searching. He clenched his jaw. How had his life turned into this? Just hours ago, he had been sitting in the finest restaurant, eating a meal worth more than some people's annual salary. Now, he was being hunted. The boy pulled him into a narrow gap between two buildings, pressing their backs against the cold brick. "Stay quiet," the boy whispered. The billionaire held his breath as one of the men stopped just feet away. The man listened, his head tilting slightly, his hand resting on his hip, where the billionaire could see a gun. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, finally, a call from the other side of the street. "Nothing here." The man hesitated, then turned away. The billionaire let out a slow breath. Too close. The boy gave him a look, his small body still tense with fear. "They won't stop," he whispered. "Not until you're gone. Or they are." The billionaire nodded, his mind working fast. Enough. He wasn't just some pawn in their game. He had built his empire from nothing. He had crushed competition, made ruthless decisions, and fought his way to the top. And he sure as hell wasn't going to let anyone decide when his story ended. He pulled out his phone. "Who are you calling?" the boy whispered. The billionaire's jaw tightened. "The one thing they didn't expect," he muttered. "Leverage. The counterattack." Within minutes, the billionaire's own security force arrived, men who had protected him for years, men who had loyalty money couldn't buy. A quiet war unfolded. The suited men? They were dangerous, but they hadn't expected the billionaire to fight back. Within the hour, they were gone. Not dead. Not captured. Just gone. Like ghosts, fading into the shadows, waiting for another chance. The billionaire stood on the empty street, his fists clenched. It wasn't over. He could feel it. This wasn't just about an attempted poisoning. This was bigger. The boy sat on the curb, his small frame exhausted, his face still pale with fear. The billionaire walked over, crouching beside him. "Come with me," he said. The boy shook his head. "It's not safe." The billionaire smirked. "Nothing is." A pause. Then, the boy looked up, searching his face as if trying to find something, some sign that this man, this billionaire, was different. After what felt like a lifetime, the boy sighed. "Okay," he whispered. The billionaire nodded, standing up. "Then let's go." As they walked away, the billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that his entire world had just changed. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for truth. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting alone. The life lesson. Power. Money. Influence. None of it had saved him. In the end, it had been a homeless child, someone with nothing, who had shown him the truth. And now? Now, he had a choice. Stay the man he had always been. Or become something more. He glanced down at the boy beside him. He had already made his choice. And he wasn't looking back.